Hello and welcome to the Daily Mirror's Behind the Press podcast, where we bring you conversations with people who shape our daily news cycles. On this episode, I want to address a question about how you and I can traverse the vast, endless space that's the internet safely. And to have that conversation, I have with me Asela Waidyalankara, a cybersecurity professional. Thank you for taking the time, Asela, to come and speak to us and to be here. I introduced you as a cybersecurity professional, which you are, but in preparing for this podcast, I realized there's a lot more nuance to what you do. So let me start by asking you, what is a day or a week like in the life of Asela Waidyalankara? What roles do you play?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really enjoy being here, and thank you for having this conversation. I think it's important that you are doing it. So a typical day or a week, I wear, I would say, roughly around 3 hats. One is I have my own cybersecurity consultancy. I speak to organizations. I tell them from a strategy level how they can approach cybersecurity and how I can help them to become more resilient. The word we use now is resilient. No longer do we say you can't get hacked. That conversation has shifted. The second hat I wear is of an educator. I lecture on cybersecurity and emerging technologies in a few institutions, and that also keeps me busy. And thirdly, and I think it's more important from a national scale, I get involved in the policy discussions. I believe there's very less people to do that, so I make it a point as national service to get involved in, especially this area, the policy discussions and to shape the policy on it. So that's my typical week.
Okay, so what I hear is that you have a long and versatile history in cybersecurity. I'm curious to know, you were telling me that you've been in the field for 15 years. How have you seen the cybersecurity space evolve in that time? And as an extension to that, how have you seen the threats that people face also change in that time period?
Excellent question. I wish I had more time. Well, if you look at perhaps, let's say, more than a decade ago, the internet penetration in the country, how we approach cybersecurity. Cybersecurity was seen as, from an organizational point of view, an IT problem. Oh, this is happening, let's get the IT guys to fix it. There was really very less conversation behind that. And, we have this problem, let's buy a box or buy a tool and we'll fix it. That was the conversation. And when it comes to the general public, I think internet penetration hadn't reached the sort of maturity it had reached now. Okay. So then there, let's say, what you do online, how that was shaped was very different to now, because it's more smartphone driven. Gone are the days where you had to go to a desktop and connect to the internet, and that was there. And gone are the days where you're going to make sure that particular machine, Shehan, is secure. You have an antivirus, and that's the kind of thing. But now you're everywhere because you're on the move. You have your smartphone, you have other devices. So the devices have also changed. We use the term now cyber to suggest anything that's connected to the internet. What do I mean by anything? Your car can be connected to the internet. Your washing machine now can be connected to the internet. Your TV, most likely, smart TVs are connected to the internet. So now the complexity of cybersecurity has really changed when you look at securing those assets as well. It's no longer, let's secure this network or secure this machine. So that's the change, I would say, and people's relationship with technology as well. It has changed. It's now become part and parcel of their lives. Most of the stuff you do now, if you look back 15 years ago, you would go to the bank to do something. You would order, or rather online ordering was unheard of, or rather the take-up was very low. But now it's a different ball game altogether, and you have these cottage industries that's primarily social media driven. Their business is on social media. So that way it has evolved a lot, and with that the threat landscape has evolved.
What technological advancement or IT advancement in general in your time in the industry has made the world more vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks? But is it fair to say that it's just the explosion of like you said, smartphones and how easy it is now to get access to the internet, is that what you would say is the biggest change?
Well, interesting question. Thank you for that. I would say the relationship on how you get online. Now it's that barrier to being online is seamless. So you have your phone, you wake up in the morning now. Most of us, the first thing you do is you pick up your phone. You go to sleep, possibly you have your phone with you when you're going to your sleep. So the relationship with the internet, the relationship of being online has vastly changed. So like I said, because the barrier to entry, and of course data has got cheaper. We've got more data now. Sri Lanka was very fortunate because I've been involved in the telco industry, I can know this. We've actually had cutting edge telecommunication technology that was available to our citizens. We were the first in South Asia to have 4G. We were the first in South Asia to have 3G. 5G, we just missed the bus because of the economic crisis, but we've had, and we are one of the cheapest data countries in the world. India is of course the cheapest in the world, but if the rankings are correct, if I recall, it's about still we are the 20 cheapest internet per GB cost in the world. So all of those factors have really helped change that relationship.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Do you feel people have not realized how much they're giving away in terms of their privacy? And as a counterpoint, do you think it's also a case where whether it's an app or it's a company, they have better understood how to get the most they need from people in terms of like their information or their data? Do you think that there is a lack of education among people as to the dangers of making their information public?
That's an excellent question. I can lecture on that for a long time, but I don't want. Okay, let me start with this. We don't have a culture of, forget about data privacy. We don't have a culture of privacy. If you take, for example, the European Union, they have a very mature jurisprudence on privacy, and the culmination of that led to the GDPR being introduced in 2018. And that is considered up to date the gold standard on data privacy regulation. Sri Lanka has also incorporated some, not all, in their local act. But that being said, we also didn't have this formal education on how to interact with technology. So I think the example I take is, especially when it comes to these digital natives. Who are these digital natives? They are Gen Z, who are probably born after the year 2000, 2003. They've grown up with high-speed internet. And I want you to let that sink in, Shahan. They've grown up with high-speed internet, broadband, high-speed internet. Their relationship to cyberspace is very different to you and I. We are immigrants to cyberspace. They are constantly online, the way they interact, and you would see the best example of that is Gen Z prefers to chat than call. You would see that. So that is one aspect of their relationship to technology, because they've been texting since baby days, literally. So those guys, what they've learned how to be online was not in a formal education setup. It's akin to someone giving you the car keys and telling you, here's a car, now drive. Now you may know what to do, or you may probably have a general idea what to do, but you may not know the nuances of driving 100%, which is why you have a driving test. You need to study the signs and all of that. This is what has happened to us as well. We've had an explosion of users. We've had an explosion of connectivity, especially in the urban areas. That was not complemented with actually educating you. There's a concept that we deal with, it's called digital citizenship. That's a lot of stuff, Shehan. That's not even cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is actually one aspect of it. There's ethics, there's respect, there's how to behave online, all of that. And that is the lack and the lacuna you see now in cyberspace, because we haven't given that digital citizenry education. And this should ideally be taught in schools for a very young audience. Because don't forget, Gen Z is here, Gen Alpha is coming. 2028, they're hitting the workforce. So we have to prepare for those guys as well. They're completely different to Gen Z. Their relationship is much more advanced. Also, there is now a generation who's growing up with generative AI. How is that going to change? So these are the kind of nuances we need to figure out. And in that, we have to say, okay, we can't just keep teaching people, oh, just be online and do. No, it's a completely complex conversation which we need to teach children. We need to teach sometimes adults even. So what happens is, in 2020, when the lockdowns came, this happened primarily in South Asia. A lot of people who were not online were forced to come online. India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those countries, there was a population over 55 who had to do. So they had started using WhatsApp, they started using online platforms, they started using Facebook, all of that. Now those guys never had the understanding of how to be safe online or how to navigate cyberspace without falling into any traps or dangers. So that is a different conversation, because that I would say that demographic should be tackled separately than how you are looking at Gen Z or Gen Alpha for that matter. So it's a very nuanced conversation, but that is how I see it needs to go.
That's actually a great segue to my next question, and I think it's a question you probably get asked a lot when you do interviews. What do you see as the biggest threat to cybersecurity right now, and why is it AI?
Okay, you've answered the question for me. It is AI. AI, the way I see it, is a double-edged sword. It's incredibly helpful to us to identify threats, to look at more threats coming in. So from a technical point of view, it's incredibly helpful, and we've been using that. What happens now, the other side of it is, I would call the democratization of generative AI. What do I mean by that? AI was always there, Shehan. For example, when you are searching for a song on Spotify, or when it suggests the next song, there's AI working in the background. When Facebook is showing you suggested friends, or Instagram is showing you the suggested friends, there's a complex algorithm working in the background. It's AI. What happened is 18 months ago, a small company called OpenAI decided to democratize AI. We suddenly now have access to generative AI tools. We can give a prompt, and you can create a document, a legal document. You can create a story. So with that, the threats have also changed. I'll give you a great example. Gone are the days we say look for spelling mistakes. Look for, generally what these guys do, if they're trying to scam you, there'll be spelling mistakes, there'll be grammatical errors, whatever. No longer, because generative AI has completely changed the game. You have situations now, it has not come to Sri Lanka yet, voice cloning, where they've actually used, and this has happened to many people abroad, it sounds like your son or your daughter. And they say, listen, I'm stuck, I've had an accident, send me money. It has happened. So that kind of thing, we are not really prepared for that yet. So I sincerely hope, I've been lobbying very hard to get ready for this, because this is going to happen. This is the next stage of scams and things like that which will affect us.
Right. I want to touch on something you mentioned in one of your first answers, that you've been involved, or you're still involved in policy making at government level. How serious have governments in the past been in addressing issues about cybersecurity, data protection, and online safety? And of course, we've had bills being passed. Do you feel they're effective enough? Do you feel enough is being done, or do you think that maybe the intent of it was not correct?
Okay, complex question. Now, when it comes to this technology sector, we've had some great laws and we've had some bad laws. A great example is the PDPA. Now, I've been involved in that from the industry perspective. I wasn't in the drafting committee, but that, Shehan, we started in 2019. It went on till 2022. There was 8 rounds of consultation. The big tech companies were also involved. There was back and forths. There was stuff we didn't agree with. The drafting committee was open to change all that. And we had probably South Asia's first data privacy legislation before India even. and also a fairly good piece of legislation. Now, being a fairly good piece of legislation doesn't really mean it's a panacea and it will solve all our problems, because even now the Data Protection Agency, the question they're having is capacity. We don't have specialized data privacy people in government. Private sector, there's a few, but in government, to have that, to get that talent, to retain that talent, to train that, that's the challenge there. Then you have things like the cybersecurity bill. It's still in bill stage. We were told last year it was coming. We as an industry gave our comments also on that. That has been long pending. Ideally, I believe in 2021, there was a cabinet decision to say we are going to do it. Nothing happened. Up to now, nothing has happened. I'm sincerely hoping the new government will take a look at it. Then you had bad laws like the Online Safety Act, where very little consultation, draconian at best, very not well thought out, not nuanced in terms of trying to solve the problem of online safety. Now, this is a problem I've also been tackling for the last 15 years. And I don't feel that they did a good job in trying to fix that, because up to now it's been used for a completely different purpose. So I think this is where policy consistency comes in. And of course, the other part is AI. Our neighbors, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, those guys are thinking about an AI Act, AI legislation. Now, I don't think that conversation is still here. And I feel perhaps for the time being, the PDPA is enough. But that being said, that is a conversation that's happening. If we want our organizations to be competitive, especially in the IT field, perhaps we need to have those legal frameworks. And we need to look at technology policy in a little more broader manner in terms of using technology to achieve our development goals, one, and to attract investment. Right. Now, for example, even the data privacy law came into being, very little people know this, came into being because actually there was a requirement for companies to come and invest in the country. They said, you don't have a robust data privacy legislation. Right. So technology companies couldn't come and invest here. Or outsourcing operations, there was a risk. So that to address that, only the PDPA came into being. Similarly, we need to have a more nuanced Cybersecurity Act. Let's, for the moment, park AI, I think there was a discussion at one point to have a national AI center. I don't know where that conversation is going with the new government, but certainly those policy measures need to be looked at holistically. That's what I'm trying to say. And somebody who understands the technology and its relationship with our development goals, FDI attraction, and everything else we are trying to make government efficient. Why? Because we are trying to make sure taxpayer money is saved. No, you don't need to go to a government office, for example, if the thing can be done online. Revenue license, for example, you don't need to go and do it if you can get it online. So those trying to make all of that efficient is also, see, why you're doing it, you need to understand. Yeah. And I think people often digitize for the sake of digitizing. And I don't think that's prudent.
Would you say there is a gap in terms of knowledge then in how to craft effective legislation?
Yes. How to draft effective policy in terms of the policymakers. Right. I mean, we have enough policy professionals here who have worked in the region, who have actually helped other countries do policy work. But unfortunately, if you look at, I'll give you a great example. When the online safety bill was being discussed in Parliament, no one really said anything about technology aspects of it. They said, you know, so and so insulted me, so and so. I've read the entire Hansard, and there was nothing there. Up to now, the cybersecurity bill is not in Parliament. No one has raised a question on that. Why is this not here? When it comes to the PDPA, no one has asked follow-up questions. Why is it not being appointed? Are we ready for now the March deadline is coming when the Act fully activates? Is the provisions now in place? Has the money been given to that organization? Is there anything? I don't see those questions being asked. And often, even in the larger discussions, the discussion about technology policy takes a backseat because we focus on other stuff.
You previously said in other interviews that I've seen that Sri Lanka needs to get into the AI space now or risk being left behind. I'm curious to know, how do you think Sri Lanka can contribute towards the development of AI in a way that not only develops the industries in the country, but I mean that could actually have an impact on the world?
Okay. The way I look at it is, again, how you're going to use AI. And again, this is the nuance I spoke about with technology. How we do it is, you identify areas within your country that require AI to augment and help you. Let me give you an example. For example, education. We have a situation where teachers are leaving. We have a teacher shortage in the country. In a country like Kenya, they've tackled this problem with AI. Then healthcare. We have a problem reaching some of the rural population. We have problems in, making sure healthcare is accessible to the general public. AI can help. Agriculture. Forecasting, models, what's going to happen, smart agriculture, all of that AI can help. So let's take those three areas first of all. These are developmental problems that Sri Lanka is facing that AI can help. And other countries, there are enough and more case studies where other countries have used AI quite effectively to tackle some of these developmental problems. So that's how you use it. It's not to have a chatbot for something. I think that's being quite simplistic about it. There are actually use cases even in South Asia where AI is being used to help population, and I think that's what we have to look at in that sense.
Right. On a more personal level, I think we are beginning to see AI become more prevalent in our day-to-day lives. As a cyber security specialist or professional, as you like to call yourself, how do you feel the government or maybe even people who teach AI, how do you think that they should position AI to young people? What are the lessons that they need to learn before they start using AI?
That's an excellent question. As an educator, I can tell you how we teach. The process of education needs to be looked at. Shahan, no longer can you ask a child now to read a book and come. That era is gone. Because why should they do it? Because they have access to advanced generative AI tools. And the tools keep getting better, and it's not only in English, by the way. If you use ChatGPT now, its Sinhala is much better than it was perhaps a year ago. It will continue to improve. So in that setting, how do you teach? Now, I think in the Middle East, there was one country that had used a very interesting example, which was told to me by an educator there. They asked children to write an essay, first using ChatGPT, and they give you the output. Now they say, okay, look at that. Now write it on your own. Don't use the ChatGPT, and compare. So I think what I want to emphasize here is how you teach is going to be different now. Because with the children coming into the education system now, and as I mentioned previously, they are going to be, just like Gen Z was online focused, Gen Alpha also, the other generations that are coming is going to be AI focused. Okay. For them, just like we are using cyberspace, they will be well versed in AI. So how would you teach those people? What are the things you want to teach those people? Honestly, I mean, if you ask them to read a book, I don't think that's effective anymore. What, for example, the World Economic Forum has said, for the next decade, the most important skills are out-of-the-box thinking, problem solving, and creativity. These are the skills that you need to teach. So maybe perhaps focus more on that, and this is why education reform is critical at the moment. No longer can we approach education how we used to do it 50 to 100 years ago. And I'm sure you agree, still that's the formula we are using: read a book, write a test, and you're done. No longer. And I think we really need an overhaul on that.
Okay. You've been a strong advocate for more conversations with young people about their safety online, and also the impact of social media on the psyche of young people. I'd like to think that there is also an importance on how much responsibility individuals take when they use social media in creating that safe space, not just for themselves but also for other people. It may seem like an obvious question, but I'll ask it anyway because I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. Do you think enough is being done in terms of enabling teachers and even parents to educate their children on how to use the internet and social media?
Short answer is no. I've taught children as young as 9, and I've had teachers come up to me and say, Mr. Asela, these guys know more than us. Now, you would expect a counseling setup or the teacher to give advice, and they're like, how are we to do that when they are more competent than us when it comes to this area? So, lot needs to be done in terms of making sure teachers are educated, parents are educated. Most of the time, I mean, one thing we say is, Shehan, digital soother. You would have seen, no? Device is given to a child very young because that keeps them preoccupied. The amount of damage you are causing for that, by that simple action, the ramifications of that, you will see perhaps a decade later. Simply. That conversation, parents need to be a little more mindful. Teachers, and it's not teachers' fault. Teachers in this country are criminally underpaid. Teachers in this country have a lot to juggle, and if someone like me goes around saying, oh, you need to do online saving, that's not fair. But there needs to be an institutionalized structure where you have counselors, where you have people, where teachers are made a little more aware, it's part of their curriculum, where they understand, and this is where what I mentioned, the digital citizenship comes in, where you're advocating these things. How do you behave online? I think you and I both will agree, if you go online, it's a very toxic space. It's not safe, especially for young women in this country, it isn't. I mean, I deal with a lot of problems. I get about 2 or 3 calls a day, Shehan. Mostly it's young ladies with some form of distress online, and either cyberbullying or their sexual material coming out, and it's a problem I don't think that gets spoken about enough, because most of these guys don't want to come into a formal law enforcement setup. They don't, and there are barriers to that. They feel they're reliving the trauma when they go to a police station because they keep asking very unnecessary questions. So like that, they feel they don't want to do that. But this is a huge problem. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And if we don't address this, the young people of our country will have huge psychological, social impacts because of that. And I don't think that's spoken about enough. We really need to address this crisis, because this crisis is coming. We are seeing bits and pieces of it. Probably, I don't think anyone realizes the big picture. All of the things you see in the news cycles, and I'm sure you are a journalist as much as I'm in cybersecurity, and you would see the news cycle, things happening. If you are like me and you start piecing all that together, you see the picture where we're heading. And I don't think we should allow to just free fall, and we must do something about it in a nuanced manner.
In terms of youth and teenagers specifically, do you think action like we've seen in Australia, where they've banned the use of social media among teenagers, do you think that step, or even a step where you regulate the amount of time teenagers spend on social media, are those good steps you feel might work in Sri Lanka?
My point is, the cat is already out of the bag. So if you are trying to limit or restrict social media, that will create a different set of problems. What we should do, and this is harder, the easier thing to do is stop social media. It's very easy. But the harder thing to do is sit down with these young people, and this is something I have been doing, and really talk to them about what's going on. What do you feel is responsible behavior? Talk about cyberbullying. It's a huge problem, Shehan. We don't talk about it enough. The sexual harassment, especially young ladies are facing. All these other things that are happening. We need to talk to them. And one thing I've done Colombo schools, I've done rural schools, I go and talk to the kids and tell them, would you like this happening to your sister or to your mother? And that really hits them, especially the boys, because it has to stop with the boys. It has to stop with the boys. So when you inculcate that, and that's a harder conversation, Shreyan, that's a lot of hard work. I've grown, all my hair has grown white because of that. But then it works because there is lasting impact when you do that. You telling them, a teenager, you can't use your phone, that's really not going to, and trust me, as a parent, I'll tell you, you take the phone away, that's just not going to fix the problem.
If you look at the other end of the spectrum, where you're looking at a generation that is new to the technology in the sense that they've suddenly had to adapt their lives to what's evolving in terms of the internet and the digital space. We've seen that demographic has been vulnerable to whether it's internet scams or WhatsApp scams. How would you advise people to protect themselves when they are either on the internet or when they receive these forwards, soliciting money or whatever scams that they come across? How do you advise that generation to deal with that problem?
I believe you're talking about the elderly generation. Yes. That's a very hard conversation. Because I'll tell you why. Pre-2020, these were not localized scams. After 2020, Shehan, we saw an uptick of localized scams in local language. So it comes in Sinhala, it comes in Tamil. And it really pulls your heartstrings. If there is a cancer patient, and especially that demographic, help a cancer patient, send us money. A very straightforward thing. These are not technically complex things, by the way. The dirty thing about social engineering is it's not really technically complex. It's just making you click on something, sending you to a website that looks very similar to the website you think you're at, and from that taking your money. But what happens is it's incredibly customized now to people. You had very recently something that said you have something from the post office. That was all in Sinhala, by the way. I recall at COVID time, one leading bank, they said, send us the front and the back of your credit card because we'll give you 5,000 bucks. A lot of people fell for that. So this is where, as I mentioned, just telling people don't click on links, don't forward links is not enough. How you approach a Gen Z and how you tell them about online safety and digital safety is very, very different to a 55-year-old or a 60-year-old. The examples I use, for example, when I do it, the examples I use, the conversation, the way I position it is completely different to a Gen Z. I will use padlocks as an example. I will use a house being locked as an example, whereas Gen Zs won't get that. It's a completely separate conversation, which is why I talk about nuance. Nuance needs to happen. I can just look at that camera and say, listen, don't share your password, don't share your account details. It's not enough. Because the way the attack vector comes or the threat vector comes, it really tugs on your heartstrings, or it's really, really customized. Let's say you're a pensioner. It comes from the pensions department. What you to do? So a certain degree of skepticism will help, but how much? So there's technical conversation happening separately. I mean, I don't want to get into it, but how we are trying to make security and authentication a little more seamless so that it happens in the background and it's less invasive as far as the user is concerned. Maybe you don't need to use a password. Maybe you don't need to remember 10,000 things, but that's a different conversation. But as of now, because your banks, their authentication mechanism, they use the traditional one, social media and all of these other things, how especially these elderly generation who are not familiar with these technologies, and I said 2020 later, they had to use it and now they're using it. I'm sure you have an auntie or an uncle who just keeps sending forwards. When I say that, there's somebody that comes to your mind. So it's a very, very tough conversation to don't send these things. And they're the most vulnerable. I've dealt with situations where they've lost their life savings. It's not a joke. And just because it's a very localized, good looking scam. So we need to, this is another silent crisis. People are losing a lot of money because of this. And it's outside the responsibility of, let's say, financial institutions. It's outside, yes, you can go to law enforcement, but they said, listen, the money is already gone. So we need to make sure there's a lot of investments made to have a sustained public relations exercise. Now what I see is when there's a problem, Shehan, people talk about it, it's in the news, you guys do a good job on it, and then it dies until the next wave comes. Because this is going to keep happening. Now it's going to come as a Christmas thing. It's going to come as Aurudu. It's tomorrow if there was floods, Gangmathura Adara. It came out like that. So you have to have a sustained campaign to say, you know, this is going to happen, this will come in different avatars, please be aware.
To what extent would you say that legislation like the Cybersecurity Act could address these issues?
Well, Cybersecurity Act will formalize. What happens is we have CERT at the moment. CERT was done in 2006 as a daughter institute to ICTA. So we have the conversation now that ICTA is also to be phased out. That being said, we need to have a formal legal structure where cybersecurity is being spoken about, and that's what the Cybersecurity Act does. It creates what we call a CSA, Cybersecurity Agency. So this will be the apex body that will deal with cybersecurity matters. These guys can ask for funding, for example, to run some of these campaigns. Now in Australia, they have something called ScamWatch. ScamWatch is a site, when you go, it tells you what the latest scams are now. Actually, when you go to that website, you can get an understanding of what are the latest scams that are happening. You get a fairly good idea. Now that's run by the cybersecurity agency of that country. So these are the things that need to happen. As you can see, the more we wait, the bigger the problem becomes.
I think it would be unjust to talk to you and not ask you for your tips for how we should navigate the internet. I know you mentioned not sharing your password, not sharing private information, but I feel like the problem is greater than just advocating for those steps. So how would you advise people to keep themselves safe when they are using the digital space?
Healthy dose of pessimism. Because if you really want something, no one's going to WhatsApp you. If your bank wants to talk to you, it's not going to send you a WhatsApp forward. If you want some money, you won't see it on social media. Your bank will get in touch with you. So, that healthy level of skepticism actually helps, especially the elderly population, where you say, are you sure about this? Because for other aspects, they are, in fact. It's just when it comes to this space, they feel it's digital, it's easy, it's seamless, so therefore they don't look at it. So like you very correctly said, I can tell people don't share your passwords, make sure you have two-factor authentication, use strong password. I can tell you all that. But that is meaningless given the avalanche of things that are happening, because the conversation needs to be different with them. They need to understand why it's important. And this alludes to the fact that I spoke previously about understanding why privacy is important to you, why your data is important to you, why data privacy is part and parcel of, as a digital citizen, part and parcel of your activities online. What you share, what you don't share, especially the young guys, share a lot of stuff which comes back to them in negative ways. It's not even the cybersecurity. They go for interviews and we see unnecessary things sometimes. So you need to understand that. That is a Shehan. I can tell you all these things, what we generally say, and that's not going to work. We need to have a better conversation, better quality conversation with these people.
My final question to you, Asela, is as a cybersecurity professional, where would you like to see the industry go? Do you see a lot of potential for the industry going by how the country is developing? What are you looking forward to in terms of technological implementations to better enhance cybersecurity in Sri Lanka?
Good question. Where would I like cybersecurity to go? I would like more cybersecurity engineers, cybersecurity professionals, not only the technical guys, we call it GRC, governance, risk and compliance. Those guys coming into the fold. We need more of those people because globally there's a talent shortage. And I would like, just like Sri Lanka is doing quite well in terms of the IT BPO space, cybersecurity also needs to grow. That is direct revenue coming into Sri Lanka if that happens. Secondly, I would like more advanced trainings, more advanced capacity building happening in the country. Thirdly, this is a conversation that has happened since I believe 2017. Nationally, there's something we call a security operations center. There's branches of the military that is looking at it now, but a civilian security operations center is a conversation we've tried to have for a long time. It's long overdue. That will protect the country from a catastrophic cyber attack. Because if you take examples of Estonia, it happened in Ukraine before the current war, there are country scale cyber attacks that can happen. So we have to be prepared for that. The more we integrate into digital systems, the more we digitize our government, the more we expose services in digital space. As a country, we need to ensure our security. There's a security operations center. I hope the present government looks at it. There's been some funding challenges. I think that's where it's stuck at the moment. But certainly this is something that's required.
It's a good point to end on. Asela, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you being here. And to our viewers and our listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll see you in our next episode.